Hello!
Kablamo!
Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About the Bad Batch with just three nerds.
Just completely forgot the name of the series right there and then.
Yep. Whoops.
Once again, no Lao, but you got that from the card. This is sort of this is our area of expertise, really. So
yeah, as far as I'm aware, Lau loves a bit of Star Wars, but he hasn't really explored the extras.
Extended universe,
yeah. The extended stuff such as Clone Wars, Rebels, The Bad Batch.
And speaking of which, there are going to be spoilers for all of that content in this little talky, podcasty thingamadoohicker. So, you've been warned.
Yes, there's been the overhead one, there's been the verbal one. If you're moaning now, what are you doing with yourself? But by all means, if you haven't seen episode 1 of The Bad Batch, and you want to watch this video, go watch the episode and then come back to us.
Please come back.
Yeah, we're not going anywhere. We're just waiting for you to come by. So yeah, that's that. Happy May the 4th, Phil. What did you think of the episode overall?
I thought it was very good, especially for an establishing episode.
Yes.
Because something to bear in mind, a lot of people, when you have the first episode of a series, it has an element of wow factor, but then people get bored by the exposition. But it's something that you've got to understand, that it is the first episode. They've got to build the world for brand new people coming into it. And I think it did that, and then some. It kept things interesting all the more. And as you'd expect from like a 70-minute episode.
Well, yeah. I mean, the exposition at times I think felt a little clunky, but at the same time, it wasn't. It was very much, okay, here's the bit of information you need to know, and moving on. They didn't really focus on the exposition. That was never. It was very story driven for a first episode of something, establishing all these new characters. The character of Omega, which we'll talk about later. It was very focused on actually the stuff that was going on, rather than the stuff that has happened and the establishment of who they are. They sort of just got on with it, which I appreciated.
Yeah.
So yeah, we started off with Order 66.
We did, which is always a welcome sight, despite it being horrifically tragic in every perceptible way. It's seeing it from a new perspective, especially of that of the Bad Batches, was much appreciated. I mean, starting off in the Clone Wars as a whole, I think has really helped the series off a lot, because we could just have gone straight in from the transition period.
Oh yeah.
But by having a little bit of that context of the Republic, it makes the transition feel all the more awkward.
Yeah, and it allows you to sort of, you can follow it through. You don't feel like you've just been dumped in this completely new environment, because as we said last week, it's never really been explored before, the sort of post-Order 66 time, the very immediate post-Order 66 time. So being able to have the full transition laid out for you, it helps ease you into that, I guess, without everything feeling too alien. There's something familiar about it, which, yeah, is pretty cool. And so you first see them, they come in and they do this big battle, and I couldn't help but feel like Echo was just like, I guess, a little bit underpowered compared to the rest of them.
Yeah.
Like he did just feel like a clone with a drill.
Which is basically what he is, because unfortunately, while he's a member of the Bad Batch, he hasn't undergone any special mutations or the like. He's just someone who's been horrifically tortured and configured to be a utility, basically. So hopefully we're going to see a bit more of what he's actually capable of, beyond being this, extremely skilled tactician like he was back in the Clone Wars when he was an ARC trooper.
So yeah, that's especially because he's got that side of him, because the rest of him is just he's a glorified astromech, as we've been talking about, and I just felt like the tech side of things is covered by tech. So
a guy literally called Tech.
Exactly. So that side's not needed, and so then he's just there with his knife. So I guess it's the first episode, and he is an old character, so I wouldn't expect them to focus on him, but I do hope that they do give him something extra, and he's not just here just for the sake of having Echo along with him. I want him to have his own place within the rest of the group, because I think that's yet to be shown, which, I mean, it's only been 70 minutes. I'm not really complaining, it's just more of a, I guess we haven't seen that yet, So I'd like that to be explored in future. That being said, while Echo was shown, I guess, a lot less than some of the others, Wrecker, I have there's not many things I didn't like about it. If I'm completely honest, I did enjoy near enough every aspect of this episode. But Wrecker, if you don't know, he's a strong boy. He's a strong, stupid boy, and they sort of stick to that archetype there. And that is, I guess, the easiest way to incorporate a more younger, audience-friendly level of humor.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done this in the Clone Wars before with other characters, and they've done it, albeit being a more mature audience member, it's still slightly grating, but you can get over it. Whereas, I don't know about you, Phil, but I kind of found Wrecker quite obnoxious. I found him quite difficult to get along with, because I found his stupidity was just taken to that one step too far, and the jokes were repeated a little too much. Like, he loves explosions. Yeah, okay, we get it. Stop screaming explosions.
Yeah, I can see that. He was very much stuck to his archetype. But once things started to develop towards the end of the episode, like when they were breaking out of the confinement prison and stuff like that, where he's actually like getting to utilize his strength and his abilities in a bit more of a creative way than just destroy, because because while he has been sort of restricted to this archetype and this caricature of a strong dumb guy, I feel like he's going to have to grow a lot, mainly because droids are no longer the enemy. And so he's kind of got to come to terms with the fact that he can't just mindlessly go around bashing a robot anymore, because chances are he's going to be going up against his own brothers.
Yes, I definitely think out of the five of them, he's definitely got, I think, some of the most areas for growth. And I think during a lot of the moments, by no means do I actually have a problem with the character, it's more in the actual, I guess, the quieter scenes where things get a bit more serious, and then he'll come in with a quip or something, and it just rubs me the wrong way. It's just not my thing. But who knows? It might change. It might just be a way of introducing the character, because it's early days. But overall, I think the characters are promising.
Absolutely.
One thing I wasn't expecting either was Crosshair's turn. I don't want to say turn, because he's going to come back. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
But you could kind of sense the tension in Clone Wars, and even early in the episode, there was very obvious tension between them. And I had no doubt that this would happen eventually, whether it be on a small scale breakup and argument, or whether he would be turned against him, like almost like a Edmund in Narnia sort of scenario. I thought something like that may happen. However, I didn't necessarily expect it to happen this early or this extreme. Like, this is quite intense.
I'm not sure how prevalent there was any sort of contention back in the Clone Wars in Season 7. But it was very prevalent in this episode, mainly because so one thing that we got wrong in the previous video was that we said that the Bad Batch didn't have inhibitor chips.
Yes.
They all do.
They all do. I was under the impression they didn't either.
No.
Yeah.
It just so happens that their mutations have affected their inhibitor chips to the point where they were not affected by Order 66. Including Echo, who was just a bog standard clone, but through all the torture he went through, that also knocked off his chip. But the one that was actually slightly affected was Crosshairs.
Yeah, which is that's an interesting concept to explore, and I'm rather that they did have the chips, because then you've got the possibility of, okay, Order 66 is an issue right now for Crosshair. And yes, it might be reusing a bit of a storyline later, but there's potential for other orders to be given across the army towards the end of the clones' lifespan within the Imperial Army. That could, again, potentially interfere with them, and it might... Okay, Order 66 has shown itself in Crosshair quite badly, but others could affect others, and there's there's room for certain things to almost. This could potentially be a continuous issue for Crosshair. That they might resolve this by the end of the series, because I have a feeling he's probably going to be the sort of main bad guy for the series, and by the end of it,
I would love that to be the case.
And by the end of it, they sort of bring him back, and then for season 2, they can focus purely upon Tarkin or whoever else is standing in their way. I'd love to see that, but then for after they bring him back, to still have almost like reoccurring issues where, they might find a lost Jedi or something and end up helping them, but...
Such as the Padawan that they let loose early on in the episode.
I definitely don't feel like that's the last we've seen of him. We'll most likely see him again.
Far from it.
And so then seeing him again and then having a really good character development moment of Crosshair having to sort of fight that in his head and actually come to terms with it and ultimately make friends with this Jedi or anyone else for that matter, like in future, that could be a really interesting sort of character moment.
There is a lot to explore with him, especially with this whole because with all of the clones, it's the case that we explored in the Clone Wars series with was it Kix? I want to say was he the one who initially went through the arc? It was one of them, the one with the teardrop on his eye.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I know who you're on about.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Can't remember all the bloody names of the clones.
So many have fallen.
He had moments where his chip was malfunctioning, and so he went and executed Order 66 early, but then sort of came out of it and came round and was like, "Oh my God, what have I done?" Like, there's all of this guilt and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we've seen that is actually the case with Crosshairs. I keep on wanting to call him Deadeye.
Yeah, I wanted to call him Deadshot loads as well, and that's a completely wrong franchise.
But when they were all contained in the prison, Omega has been revealed to be another one of the modified clones. So basically another member of the Bad Batch. Their specific capabilities have not been outlined, but they seem to be an empath of sorts. They can read minds or emotions.
I was going to say, we'll touch on that in a second. If you want to continue with your point, I've got another point to follow up on that.
Yes, but so we saw in that cell that Omega said to Crosshairs, I know that this isn't your fault. I know that you don't want to do this. And so all of these thoughts are going through his head that clearly this chip is having a big impact on him. And while there is every chance that I could see them, potentially bringing Crosshairs back into the fold within 4 episodes or so, I would much prefer him to be a long-running problem throughout, because I think that poses so much more of an interesting dynamic.
I see him as being more of a Moff Gideon in The Mandalorian as opposed to a temporary threat. Definitely, constantly coming back. They've got to fight through, say, waves of people, and every now and then he'll step off the ship, and it's like, oh, great. Now we've got to deal with him.
But it's far more interesting than just a standard Moff Gideon.
Exactly.
Because with Moff Gideon, it's like, okay, big bad villain introduced, that's what he is. He's a big bad villain. This is their friend, their ally. They're not going to want to take him out.
No, they're preferably not even going to want to hurt him if they can. They just want to talk him out of it.
Exactly, and that's not going to make things easy for them. And so them exploring that and also having to adapt and manipulate their tactics that they've built up over the years, they're not going to be able to use those as much because he knows all of them. It's the same sort of stick that was explored in season 7 when Echo was used as an algorithm for the Techno Union.
Yes.
Rex was there and he was struggling why are all of our maneuvers being countered? It's because his previous friend and great tactician that he made all these plans with was being used so that the enemy and the separatists had control and knowledge over all of the tactics. Exact same scenario here, except with even more autonomy, with the fact that he's been turned full on clone post 66.
And being a skilled sharpshooter, he doesn't even have to be there. That's, I guess, the other threatening thing is the fact that not only does he know their moves, but he can be 1,000 steps ahead of them quite literally, physically. He can be miles away and still have eyes on them and know what they're doing, as opposed to someone like Wrecker, who would prefer at least to, okay, yes, he knows their moves, but he's going to get up close and personal. They're going to see him coming, whereas there's that whole other aspect of the sort of reconnaissance side of him.
And another thing that's interesting to look into is, because we're going into the Empire side of things, technology is advancing in a new way, and we're seeing the first instances of probe droids.
Yes.
Which probe droids, basically scout droids. They're droids that would go out with multiple different cameras, and they would be able to collect audio and video of goings on. That notably seen in The Empire Strikes Back on Hoth.
Yes.
That's how the base on Hoth was initially discovered. They've been utilised in the Bad Batch, and so we're going to see that, options are going to be severely limited as the technology, grows and grows.
Yeah, I think you've got the nail on the head there. Really, that's All I say is really back with your point before it gets lost in the midst of conversation. Now, you have to hear me out on this one.
Oh, here we go.
Because, just to give some context, I watched this episode first thing in the morning. I then went about my day, and then came home, and now we're having this podcast. Meanwhile, Phil went about his day, watched the episode, and now we're having this podcast.
Yeah, there's probably about 11 hours between our separate viewings of it.
So I've had time to really digest and think about it in the long term. Meanwhile, Phil is fresh off it with all the stuff, which I've probably even forgotten. So I think between us, we've got a good range of ideas. And I've come up with this theory about Omega.
Yes.
So, one, I'm not entirely convinced she has an inhibitor chip. In fact, if anything, I'm very doubtful, as she was always intended not to work as a clone, but to be an assistant on Kamino. So the need for an inhibitor chip to follow orders, etc., isn't necessarily needed.
Yeah,
so
that's
one.
That doesn't seem too unreasonable.
Yeah, I'm just clearing that one up first. Two, that scene in the cell, she was very in tune with people's minds and emotions, and so, as you said, very much in an empath style way. Not only that, she had very good aim with that first time blaster shot right at the very end when she saved the Batch's life. Now, I'm not sure whether you can see where I'm going with this.
I feel like I kind of see where you're going.
But not only that, I've come up with a theory which not only fits into the scale of the Bad Batch, but fits into Star Wars all the way up to The Mandalorian. And beyond, actually, into The Rise of Skywalker. So, during the prequels, as far as I'm aware, you cannot clone Force-sensitive individuals and have that Force sensitivity remain in the clones. Now, hear me out on this. What if Omega is in fact a Force-sensitive individual? They have figured out a way of imbuing Force sensitivity on a clone, or even just breeding a Force-sensitive clone from the get-go. She is then going to assist them, help them in whatever way in the Bad Batch. The Bad Batch ultimately is a very small a piece of the puzzle. However, the Empire is going to hear of this clone. The Empire is then going to hunt down the Bad Batch, not only for the Bad Batch themselves, but for Omega, because this is a very valuable resource. This is how Palpatine gets hold of the cloning technology available for him to clone himself with the Force sensitivity that he uses in The Force Awakens, and has been hinted to as well with experimentation with Grogu in The Mandalorian. So ultimately, in short, the Kaminoans have cloned a clone, female clone, with Force sensitivity. The Empire hear about this, go, ooh, I like a bit of this Force sensitive cloning. They then go after Omega. They then go after the Kaminoans. Once they find out how to do it, they then get going on how to make it stronger, which is what leads them to Grogu. Then once the whole Grogu thing's gone down, they then move forward with cloning Palpatine, which then leads you to the end of the saga. It's sort of retconning what some people would call massive plot hole in the sequel series.
So in regards to cloning in the sequels, I believe it has been explored in comics that, and what we saw at some point during The Mandalorian, we saw cloning vats and test tubes of early versions of Snoke.
Yes, exactly.
That, I believe, was created using Luke's severed hand. That was retrieved, and I believe that's the case. I'm not sure if this is Legends and whether it's no longer canon, but I believe that is the case in terms of Force-sensitive cloning.
Exactly, but the point is, I guess I'm making is, how did they even learn about how was this possible in the first place? Like, yes, okay, Luke's severed hand may have been an ingredient, but the method, as it were, to bake this clone, who knows? And so that's my theory. I think Omega could potentially have some level of Force sensitivity, even if it's just very light. It's just the inklings, because this is very early days in the Force cloning world. But I feel like there could be something there, because apart from being female, whereas the rest of the clones are not, there is no particular difference between Omega and a normal clone, except for the potential lack of inhibitor chip. And so I think that might be it will almost act as a spidey sense for Spider-Man. Rather than full Force wielding, it will be more of a sixth sense, almost.
Now, another possible route that they could take, yours is definitely a valid one, but I was thinking that maybe she's potentially more along the lines of a slight amalgamation of all the members of the Bad Batch. Because we've already seen, as an example, that Hunter has heightened perception. So has that sort of spider sense capabilities that you're alluding to. The great shot, the first shot that initially made, links to Crosshairs. The fact that she bashed down an entire ventilation system when she was breaking out could potentially lead to the big bulky guy whose name I forget.
Although she didn't break the thing. It was Wrecker.
She did. No, so I'm not talking about the valve. When she was crawling up in the vents, it started to creak, and then she slammed on it, and it fell down.
Right, I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you know, obviously this empath idea might be something completely new, but I'm personally leaning a bit more towards that avenue of things, because the reason why I'm slightly reluctant to go down the Force sensitivity side of things is, one, because of stuff that we've already alluded to with Luke's hand and stuff like that happening later on down the line, but also I'm not sure how comfortable the Kaminoans would be knowing that all of their clones had inhibitor chips to kill Jedi and Force sensitive people, and also be breeding a subject who could fall under that category.
Yes. No, I definitely but that being said, the Kaminoans were also known to sort of they dealt on both sides of the table. They didn't really have an allegiance, as it were. So I'd also wouldn't put it past them to be doing this in secret, and this could be a personal development thing that they just hope no one finds out about. But I think definitely both options are very valid, and I do really like that, because that also acts as a good way to sort of glue the group together, where she's got a little bit in common with everyone. Not too much that they're identical, but enough to go, look, I can see your viewpoint, but also I can see yours, and sort of...
Because it also justifies why she's just so suddenly very attached to these people.
Yes.
Because if she is a direct derivation of all of their talents, and is basically, you know, brought in to be a part of the Bad Batch, it makes entirely sense why she is, why she is who she is, and why she has the talents that she does.
I guess, yours makes sense more from a short-term perspective, as far as, say, the Republic wanted a super soldier, and so ideally they'd have had the obedience of normal clones, but with the abilities of the Bad Batch, trying to cram that into one individual, and she is almost the result of that, and so that sort of works for almost the Republic side, or even just moving forward with the Imperial side, just creating a super soldier. Meanwhile, I guess mine is more thinking about not necessarily within the Bad Batch, but more retconning the sequels and making that make sense that way. Which, I mean, either is plausible, and I'm interested to... It probably won't be either of our thoughts. It's going to be something completely different, but...
Yeah, absolutely. I am fully expecting us to be completely wrong, but we like exploring cool ideas.
That's what the whole point in this is just exploring cool ideas, and albeit no one commented on the last video, but if you have any cool ideas of your own, please put them in the comments, because we can sit here for hours and talk about this, and so we'd love to talk about it with you in the comments. But yeah, and aside from that, I just really like Omega as a character. I just found her immediately likable, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and it's not necessarily a good thing either. It's just, I don't know, a lot of the time with new characters they purposely give them flaws so they have something to develop, whereas Omega at least isn't immediately, other than being very young and potentially naive and inexperienced, is ultimately I just found her all round likable.
Yeah,
there was nothing particularly stand outy, but it was just like, you know what, I like this character and I like their attitude, and they're just generally fun to see on screen.
I feel like 80% of that is due to the New Zealand accent. It is just so utterly endearing.
It's so warming.
But also, yeah, I mean, she hasn't done anything that antagonistic. She hasn't done the sort of standard thing of dumb, ignorant child does something stupid that normal people wouldn't do because they're too young and inexperienced. Almost did that with Wrecker when he was shot by crosshairs.
Yes.
Nearly put herself out into danger as a result of that. But I'm glad that Hunter actually put a stop to that. Otherwise, I would have been quite frustrated by that. Just because it at that point it becomes a trope. It's an expected trope. Young kid does something naive, learns from it, grows from it, and then ends up correcting herself later on down the line.
Especially when that was, I think, at least for the first seasons 1 to 4 of the Clone Wars, that was Ahsoka's arc, and I think it would be lazy to try and repeat that. And thankfully, I don't think they're going to go down that route, because otherwise, I think she'd have been shown herself to be far more arrogant, where she seems to be far more sort of just generally perceptive and thoughtful about what she's doing, which is, it's nice to see. But yeah, also I don't know whether you noticed in the training arena,
yes,
when Tarkin, the dick that he is, pulled out the live fire ammunition, they look like, and I'm guessing they are, first generation Dark Troopers.
Oh, so they were.
Because if you think about it, this is well explored within sort of canon Star Wars elsewhere, but if you go all the way to The Mandalorian, they are almost the best developed versions of Dark Troopers, and the whole reason the Dark Troopers came about is because they tried using like real sort of commando soldiers, and found that the more and more parts of their suits and stuff they replaced with technology, the more effective they became, until they just started replacing the soldiers with robots. And so in The Mandalorian you see, like, I can't remember whether they were like 3rd generation or further, but they were far more advanced. Whereas if you look at them now, it was just cool to see. The moment they popped up, I was like, oh, that's a Dark Trooper, and it looks very basic compared to other ones we've seen, but I'm guessing it's a first gen or even a prototype. Like,
I would definitely say prototype, because that was something, it's something that you could have seen from the trailer, but when they were in that arena, it wasn't like what we saw back with Domino Squad in like season 2 of the Clone Wars, where they were up against battle droids and super battle droids in their training forms. These were not recognizable droids. These were,
exactly.
You didn't see any separate. They weren't doing any more separatist training because the CIS have been essentially wiped out. They're dissolved, so there's no need for them to train at that point. So the fact that they've adjusted so quickly to have this brand new batch of things is
definitely. And I almost want to think that Palpatine and others within the higher ranks of the Republic already had some of this stuff on the go in the first place. It's more just switched allegiance over to the Empire as it's happened. But then that does also lead the possibility of, okay, are we going to now see more Dark Trooper task forces coming after them, or mixes of clones and Dark Troopers together, maybe with a bit of Crosshair as well?
Are we going to see the cloned Silo Beast or whatever that was?
Oh, the Zillo Beast. Yeah.
That's never getting revisited. It was the concept, as great as it was far too overpowered.
Yeah.
They can't ever introduce that in, like, for those who don't know, the whole concept was there was this ancient beast that was unearthed, almost Balrog style. Had impenetrable armor that not even lightsabers could pierce. Like on par with Beskar, if not more. We don't really know the capabilities of it, and they basically tried to kill this beast and like create armor for clones, so that they'd be completely invincible. And Palpatine wanted to clone the Zillo beast. But that was a thread that was left unexplored, and probably for good reason.
Yeah, I mean, I'd almost like to see that re-explored, or at least tied up in the background, because I have a feeling this isn't the last we've seen of Kamino within this story. I feel like Kamino is almost going to be the base of operations for the Empire. I feel like the Empire are going to be very much based off of ships, Coruscant, and Kamino, because I feel like there is going to be a lot. There was a slight talk of the trade deals between the clones and them switching to conscription, and I will almost expect an almost subplot with Tarkin and the Kaminoans, sort of, I guess, the more political side of that. But in doing that, they could potentially, I don't know, show off something they were doing with the Zillo Beast in the background and just say, look, we've got these armors, and you'll just see it in the background or in a file that some other nerd will pick up on and post on Reddit, and we'll go, ooh, look at that. That was cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too sure about a return to Kamino for the Empire. I do feel like the fact that they introduced conscription so early on means that, you know, while they're going to try and milk as much out of the current batch of clones as they've got, I don't feel like they're going to reinvest in it, and Kamino is not going to willingly give up its. I have a feeling that there's every chance that the end of the Bad Batch this season might end with the destruction of Kamino.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think, in Legends, and then uncannoned by Disney when Disney brought it out, but there was a war, like a civil war, amongst the clones and the conscripted soldiers of the Empire in the sort of, I guess, dying days of that deal. They sort of rallied up together and tried to take on the Imperial Army. I would almost like to see Dave Filoni, because he's done it before with other stuff when it got uncannoned, recanoning that. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a Kamino subplot where actually Kamino became an independent state with their own arsenal of weaponry, and they do a last stand sort of thing and ultimately fail.
Yeah.
But that would be in itself really cool to see, and then have almost the Bad Batch come back home just for the, like, I guess, the final battle, just to help them out. Because at the end of the day, they'd no longer be Imperial, they'd just be Kamino with the clones.
I do feel like very final season of the Bad Batch, like, because obviously, you know, the Bad Batch have to die out at some point.
Yeah, that something has to happen.
Yeah. So I would fucking love the idea of, like, the final episodes being the Siege of Kamino.
That would be so cool.
A final stand, like, and not like a final stand as in Death Star comes online, blows up planet, end of story. I want, like, full on guerrilla warfare, domination, wipe out every single living thing that isn't on one side or the other.
Yeah, definitely, like full scale planetary war. That would be quite cool. And I guess there's only really one more thing that I really wanted to talk about, and that was right at the very end when they said to go sector J18 or something like that.
Yeah.
Who are you putting your money on them visiting?
Rex. It's gonna be Rex. It's Rex.
I was gonna say, I was thinking
they don't have any other friends.
Yeah, I was thinking, is it Rex? Would they consider him a friend because he's just a reg? But then I was like, I don't know, maybe Rex in the very immediate after Order 66, maybe he reached out to Hunter off screen and was like, boy, what's going on? Are you guys okay? Because Ahsoka's just ditched me on this planet somewhere and told me to get a move on.
But yeah, for the sake of, you know, the existing audience that is there, I don't think that they would have said, I can think of a friend that we have, because we haven't seen any friends that they have outside of Rex.
Or Echo, but he's there.
Yeah, exactly. The Ghost of Fives.
Oh yes.
No, they don't even know Fives.
And I guess one last thing on returning characters, Saw Gerrera.
Yes.
I was very pleased at his sort of showing up in the first episode, and I have a feeling he's going to be a reoccurring character.
I really hope he does, because that would be really unfortunate if he only
shows
up for the amount he does.
Go high. But no, I'd quite like to see it almost being... okay, so you've got the Resistance, or is it the Rebels? Not the Resistance. First Order and Resistance is the Rebels.
The Rebellion, yes.
The Rebellion. I'd love to see them versus the Empire, and then with the Bad Batch just sort of getting caught between, where they don't really want to give full allegiance to the Rebellion because of their past, and they feel almost some level of allegiance to the Empire, but at the same time not actually wanting anything to do with them because they don't really stand for that.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to see them being sort of caught in between and almost bouncing between them constantly, and actually not really having either of a side. They end up fighting them both, and also siding with them both under certain situations.
I do feel like end of this season, there's going to be some big plot device, big fight that happens. I feel like it's them going to be teaming up with Saw Gerrera and the Rebellion.
Definitely.
It's gonna be there for a moment, and then they're going to move on their ways, and possibly abandoning the kid.
It is good to see another Rebellion leader as well, other than Leia. Like, as much as I love Leia and the original trilogy gang, there would have been other groups of the Rebellion. They were not the only one. They were the biggest and most, I guess, prominent, taking down the Death Star and this, that, and the other. But there would have been other groups across the galaxy, and so it's just good to explore that and see there's other people fighting the good fight.
And one very small side note, completely off topic, but just about the sequels. One thing that I wish that they'd explored was the fact that the reason why the Resistance didn't have the support that it did, and why the political environment wasn't really explored that much, was because Leia was actually, I believe, she was sort of thrown away from the government and being actually allowed to lead it, because it was found out that she was the daughter of Darth Vader.
Oh damn!
And so that's if you even alluded to what the actual political, governmental, galaxy-wide structure was, it would have made it so much better. But that is a completely different thing. Bad Batch, first episode. Fucking great. Yeah. Can't wait for the next one.
I'd give it a definite... As far as opening episodes go and establishing episodes, it's a good one.
Yeah.
And if you haven't hopped into the Clone Wars or anything, it's a bit late now. We're like 40 minutes into this episode.
It's never too late.
But yeah, by all means, if you haven't seen anything, you don't have to have seen the Clone Wars, and we'd highly recommend you do go and watch it, because it's just great. If you like Star Wars, you're going to find some level of enjoyment in it. But yeah, I think that's all I've got to say.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much for listening. This has been Just Three Nerds. I'm Josh.
I'm Phil.
And if you like what you hear and see, I guess, and you want to see/hear more, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next one.
So long.
Bye.